$2. The auctioneer called out, his voice dropping with embarrassment. Does anyone give $2 for this woman? Silence. Then laughter. Emma Carter stood on that wooden platform with every eye in Millbrook Square, mocking her too educated, too quiet, too broken for Colorado frontier life. 24 years old, and being sold like livestock nobody wanted. Then a stranger stepped from the back of the crowd. Worn boots, calloused hands. A man the town already called finished. He placed 2 silver coins on the table without a word. That moment would change both their lives forever. Friends, if this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow Emma and Nathan's journey all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling me what city are you watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story has traveled. The auction had been going on since 9 in the morning. By 2:18, women had found husbands. Some had gone for $40. One widow, still young and strong-shouldered, had sparked a bidding war that climbed all the way to $93 before a cattle rancher from Pueblo slapped his hat against his knee and hollered his final offer. The crowd had loved that. They clapped, they whistled, they stamped their boots against the dry Colorado earth like it was the finest entertainment the summer of 1878 had to offer. It probably was. Millbrook was not a town that offered much in the way of amusement. There were 2 saloons, a general store that smelled permanently of gun oil and dried beans, a church that was only half finished because the pastor had run off with the deacon's wife the previous autumn, and roughly 400 people who knew everything about each other and were bored enough to celebrate nearly anything. A frontier marriage auction was by their standards a genuine occasion. And now, with the afternoon stretching long and hot and golden over the square, there was only one woman left. Emma Carter. She had been standing on the wooden auction platform for 11 minutes. It felt like 11 years. She was 24 years old. Dark brown hair pinned back from a face that was too composed, too still, too careful. A face that had learned a long time ago not to let people see what was happening underneath. She was slight, but not fragile, with hands that showed work. Even if the work had been ledgers and trading negotiations rather than cattle roping. She wore a gray dress that was clean but not new. She held a small traveling bag in front of her, with both hands, fingers laced together so tightly that her knuckles had gone pale. She was not crying. She had decided she would not cry. Not here. Not in front of these people. Horace Milner, the auctioneer, was a heavy-set man with a damp red face and the expression of someone who had stepped on something unpleasant and was hoping no one noticed. He had been doing this auction for 6 years running, and he had never, not once, failed to place every woman. He cleared his throat. $20, he called out, though his voice carried less authority now than it had at 9 o'clock. $20 for Miss Carter, age 24, sound health, no encumbrances. Educated woman, good with numbers. Nothing. A man near the front whispered something to the man beside him. Both of them chuckled. Milner tugged at his collar. $15 then. $15, gentlemen. She's young, she's capable. Strong family background. Her father ran the Carter Trading Company out of Denver before he passed. A woman near the general store made a sound that wasn't quite laughter and wasn't quite pity. It was somewhere between the two, which was somehow worse than either. Denver, someone said from the crowd. City girl. What's she going to do out here, read cattle to sleep? That got real laughter. Long, rolling laughter that moved through the square like wind through dry grass. Emma's jaw tightened. Just slightly. Just enough that she felt it in her back teeth. Don't, she told herself. Don't give them the satisfaction. $10, Milner said. He was sweating now. $10, which is gentlemen. I want to remind everyone that every woman placed today has found good, honest work as a frontier wife, and I'd ask you to treat this process with the dignity it— 5, someone called out. Not seriously. Testing. Milner's eyes went to the voice. He shook his head. 5 is beneath the floor for this auction, and you know that, Frank. So lower the floor, Frank said and snickered. Milner did not lower the floor. Not immediately. He tried once more, his voice working hard to manufacture enthusiasm he clearly did not feel. $10. $10 for a young woman of education and ability, willing to work, willing to learn frontier life. Nobody moved. Emma stood on the platform and watched a pigeon land on the roof of the saloon across the square and then take off again, and she thought about her father. About his hands, which had been the same kind of calloused from work as hers were soft from paper. About how he used to tell her that a person's value was like a river. It didn't announce itself. It simply went where it needed to go and wore down everything that tried to stop it. Well, Papa, she thought, the river appears to have run dry. $5, Milner said at last, defeat in every syllable. $5. Final offer, gentlemen. Someone stepped forward. The silence that followed was the kind that has a texture to it. Emma could feel it on her skin. And then someone in the crowd she never saw who began to laugh. Not a short laugh. Not a polite social laugh. A real one, deep and rolling, the kind of laugh that invites other laughs to join it. And they did join it. One by one, voices added themselves until the whole square was full of it. This great rippling wave of amusement at the woman on the platform that nobody wanted, not even for $5, not even in a territory where women were scarce, and a man could go years without the company of one. Emma Carter stopped looking at the pigeon. She looked straight ahead at nothing, her chin level, her breathing controlled her whole body, a closed door. And she thought, I will get through this. I will get through this, and I will go somewhere, and I will figure out what comes next. I always figure out what comes next. She was still telling herself this when the laughter began to die. Not because anyone chose to stop, but because something at the back of the crowd had changed. A stillness, small and spreading like a stone dropped in water. People turned. Emma turned. Nathan Cole had never intended to attend the auction. He had ridden into Millbrook that morning for feed and nails, and exactly nothing else, because those were the only two things he could afford, and only barely. His ranch, what remained of it, sat 12 miles east of town, on land that had been promising once, and was now mostly stubborn. 3 years of drought had taken almost everything. He'd sold 2 horses last spring to cover the bank payment. He'd been eating the same 3 things for going on 4 months. His dog had more optimism than he did, and his dog was 11 years old and arthritic. How was 35, though he looked 40 in certain lights. Not bad-looking exactly, wide through their shoulders, sun-darkened face, gray threading early through dark hair at his temples, but worn. The way good tools go worn. Used hard, used right, still functional, but carrying the evidence of everything they'd been through. He had heard the laughter from 2 streets away while he was loading his wagon. He had not planned to go look. He had his feed. He had his nails. He had 12 miles to ride before dark and a fence section that would take all of tomorrow to repair. He went to look anyway. He pushed through the back of the crowd and came out to a partial view of the platform and the woman standing on it, and he understood immediately what he was seeing. He had been in Millbrook long enough to know about the summer auction. He had never given it much. One way or another, it was a frontier practice, not unusual, and he had always had enough problems of his own without borrowing other people's. But he had never seen it from here. From this angle. From the angle where the woman on the platform was standing absolutely still while half a town laughed at her. Nathan Cole had a temper. He had worked on it for years with mixed results. He had learned mostly to let it pass through him like weather, to wait it out, to breathe through it, to remind himself that most of what made him angry wasn't worth the energy it cost. What he felt right now was not quite anger. It was something harder and quieter than anger. Something that lived in his chest like a slow-burning coal. He looked at the woman on the platform. She wasn't crying. She wasn't breaking. She was just holding. The way a fence post holds when the ground shifts under it. You could see the effort in it if you knew what to look for. He looked at Horace Milner, whose expression was somewhere between apologetic and calculating. He looked at the crowd still grinning, waiting to see what happened next. He put his hand in his coat pocket. He had $2 silver. He had intended them for half a sack of flour and a small amount of coffee because those were the things he needed most urgently, and that was the precise amount he had left after everything else. He walked forward. The crowd parted for him, not out of respect exactly, but out of the particular instinct people have when someone is moving with a certain kind of intention and no one wants to be in the path of it. He stepped up to the auction table. He set the 2 silver dollars down. They made a small, clean sound against the wood. Horace Milner stared at them. $2, Nathan said. His voice came out level. I'll take her. The silence lasted about 3 seconds. Then the crowd erupted. Not anger laughter. Pure, delighted, incredulous laughter. $2, someone shouted. The broke coal ranch spending its last coin. Match made in heaven, 2 worthless things finding each other. Going once, going twice, sold to the man who can't keep cattle alive. Nathan did not look at them. He kept his eyes on Milner. Milner, to his credit, picked up the coins. He had a job to do, and 2 silver dollars were technically more than 0. He cleared his throat. Sold, he said with none of the ceremony he'd been saving for this moment, to Nathan Cole of the Coal Ranch for $2. More laughter. Someone applauded sarcastically. Nathan turned toward the platform. Emma Carter was looking at him. Not with relief. Not with gratitude. With something more careful than either a look that said she was assessing him the way a person assesses unfamiliar terrain, quickly, systematically looking for the drop-offs. He walked to the platform steps. He stopped at the bottom. Miss Carter, he said. Mr. Cole, she said. Her voice was steadier than he expected. I'm sorry for the way this morning went. She studied him. You didn't cause it. No, but I'm sorry for it anyway. He paused. I've got a wagon out front, 12 miles to ride before dark, if you're willing. She looked at him for another long moment, long enough that he felt it. Then she picked up her traveling bag, came down the 3 steps from the platform, and stood in front of him. What am I walking into? She asked. Direct, no softening around it. He appreciated that. He had no patience for the kind of conversation that circled around the truth for 20 minutes before landing on it. A ranch that's had 3 bad years, he said. 38 cattle, broken fences, a barn that needs serious work, a house that's standing but not proudly. He paused. Not much, Miss Carter. I won't dress it up. She absorbed this. And what do you expect from me? I expect whatever you're capable of giving. I'm not in a position to demand anything. What does that mean exactly? It means I bought you off that platform because I couldn't stand watching it anymore. It doesn't mean I own you. You do your share, I do mine. We figure out what works. Another pause. You decide it doesn't work, you say so. I won't stop you from leaving. Emma Carter was quiet for 3 full seconds. That's an unusual arrangement, she said. I'm an unusual situation, Nathan said. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, more like the ghost of one gone before it fully arrived. All right, she said. Let's go. They walked through the crowd together. People made comments. Nathan did not respond to them. Neither did Emma. They reached the wagon, and he helped her up onto the seat. Not because she needed help, she was clearly capable, but because it was the thing you did. And then he climbed up the other side and took the reins. As the wagon pulled out of Millbrook Square, he heard one last shout from behind them. Good luck, Cole. You're going to need it. Nathan did not look back. Beside him, Emma Carter sat with her traveling bag in her lap, looking forward at the road, and said nothing. 12 miles. He figured they had some time to fill. You know how to ride? He asked. Horses know. I'll teach you. A pause. I know how to keep accounts, she said. Double entry bookkeeping. My father taught me. I ran the books for his trading company from the time I was 15. Nathan glanced at her sideways. That's so. I also know how to negotiate with merchants, manage supply lines, and calculate profit margins on livestock. He was quiet for a moment. Those are useful things. I thought they might be. She paused. I'm telling you now so you understand what you actually bought for your $2. The directness of it caught him somewhere in the middle of his chest. He found himself fighting back something that might in better circumstances have turned into a laugh. I'll keep that in mind, he said. She nodded once, settled back slightly, and looked at the road ahead. That was how it started. Nathan's ranch had a name on paper. Coles Creek, after a thin stream that ran along the eastern edge of the property and had not been a creek in any meaningful sense for 2 years. In practice, the men who knew it called it the coal place, or more recently, the coal wreck. The house was 1 story, 4 rooms, solid in its bones, but neglected in its surface, the kind of neglect that comes not from laziness, but from a single person with too many more urgent things to attend to. The porch railing had a gap where 2 boards had rotted out. The window on the south side had a crack stuffed with cloth. The front door hung slightly crooked and had to be lifted as you opened it, or it caught on the frame. Emma said nothing when she first saw it. Nathan said, "It's not much." "You told me that," she said. "In Millbrook. I believed you then." She stepped inside. The main room had a table, 2 chairs, a cast iron stove, and a shelf of odds and ends. A coat hung on a nail by the door. A pair of work gloves on the table. A coffee cup that had been there long enough to leave a ring on the wood. She set her bag down. "Which room is mine?" she asked. He pointed to the door on the left. "That one. I'm on the right. The middle's the kitchen and storage." She opened the door on the left, looked in. A narrow bed, a wooden chest, a small window. Clean, at least he'd swept it out that morning, she noticed, which told her something about the man she'd been sold to. "It'll do," she said. "I'll get your things from the wagon." "I can get my own things." He stopped, looked at her. She looked back. "All right," he said. She went and got her bag. That first evening, Nathan made supper, beans and cornbread and coffee that was strong enough to strip paint, and they sat at the table across from each other and ate it. The conversation was careful, functional. He told her about the ranch schedule, what needed doing tomorrow and the day after, where the well was, where the horses were kept. She listened. She asked specific questions, not social questions, practical ones. How many acres? How much in the bank versus owed? What was the price he was getting per head at the Pueblo market? He answered them all. Halfway through supper, he put his fork down and looked at her. "You're calculating something." She met his eyes. "Yes." "What?" "Whether this ranch can recover, or whether it's already past the point where effort makes a difference." A pause. He had not expected that kind of answer. He had expected something softer, more evasive. And, "I don't have enough information yet," she said. "I need to see the account books." He stared at her. "You keep account books?" she asked. "I keep receipts," he said. "Some of them. I'll need everything you have, tomorrow after morning chores." He should have felt defensive. He had expected to feel defensive. What he felt instead was something closer to relief, the specific bone-deep relief of a man who has been carrying a weight alone for so long that he has forgotten what it felt like not to carry it suddenly, discovering that someone else is reaching for the other end. "All right," he said. She picked up her fork again. "The cornbread is good." It was not good. It was serviceable, which was the most that could be said of it. But he recognized the gesture for what it was. "Thank you," he said. They finished supper in something that was not quite companionship, but was pointing in that direction. The first week was an exercise in mutual education, delivered at speed. Emma Carter, it turned out, was not delicate. She had let people believe she was in Millbrook, partly because fighting the perception had seemed pointless, and partly because she had learned that the less threatening she appeared to be, the more latitude she was given. It was a strategy her father had taught her, applied to ledger negotiations. Let them underestimate you. Then, do the work. She did the work. She was up before Nathan the second morning, which surprised him considerably. He found her at the kitchen table with every receipt, invoice, and scrap of paper he owned, spread before her in a grid. Only she apparently understood making notations in a small book she had produced from her bag. "You don't have to start today," he said. "Why wait?" she said without looking up. He made coffee. He did not argue with her because, on reflection, he agreed with the logic. By noon, she had a clearer picture of his financial situation than he had allowed himself to look at directly in 2 years. She came to find him in the north pasture, where he was repairing fence line, and she stood at the fence and told him what she'd found in a voice that was honest without being cruel. You owe the bank $230, she said. You have roughly $48 in cash. You have 38 cattle, of which maybe 30 are worth selling at current Pueblo prices. That gets you to about $160 if you sell now. Nathan kept working the fence wire. His jaw was tight. I know the numbers. Do you know that you're paying too much for your winter feed supply? He stopped. The merchant you're using, Heller in town, he's charging you 15% above the county average. I've found 3 of his invoices. If you buy direct from the Oats Grain Cooperative in Stratton, you save that 15%. On your volume, that's approximately $9 a year. $9, he said slowly. It's not nothing, she said. It's not everything either, but it's a start. She paused. There are other things. The saddle you sold in March, you took $14 for it. That was a working saddle, hand-stitched, good leather. It was worth $22 at market price. I needed cash fast. I know. I'm not criticizing you. I'm telling you what I found. She was quiet for a moment, watching him. Nathan. It was the first time she had used his name. He noticed it. From the slight shift in her expression, she noticed that he noticed. This ranch isn't dead, she said. It's been mismanaged. Not out of incompetence. Out of one man trying to do everything alone and not having eyes for all of it at once. She paused. I have different eyes. He looked at her across the fence line. The afternoon light was behind her, and her expression was even and steady, and held nothing he needed to be afraid of. What are you proposing? He asked. I manage the accounts and the merchant negotiations. You manage the cattle and the land. We stop competing with what the other one is better at and start using it. We've known each other 6 days. I know, she said. Is that a problem? He thought about it. He thought about the account books and the merchant invoices and the fact that she had found in 6 days of looking things he had been too close to see for 3 years. No, he said. That's not a problem. She gave one short nod. Good. She turned to go back to the house. Emma. She stopped. Why are you doing this? He asked. You could run the accounts and do the minimum. Nobody here to make you do more. She looked back at him over her shoulder. Because it needs doing, she said. And because I'm not the kind of person who does the minimum when there's more available. She walked back toward the house. Nathan Cole stood at the fence he'd been repairing and felt for the first time in a long time something tentative and fragile and almost dangerous begin to move in his chest. He was very careful not to name it. He went back to the fence. By the end of the 3rd week, the ranch had changed in ways both visible and invisible. The visible things were Emma's doing, and she did not wait for permission. She reorganized the storage room and reduced waste by a method she called first in, first out, which was a trading company practice her father had drilled into her, and which meant that older supplies were used before newer ones, and nothing quietly rotted in the back of a shelf. She established a kitchen garden in the strip of ground behind the house, working the soil herself every evening after supper, putting in carrots and beans and squash from seed packets she had brought in her traveling bag. Nathan had thought them a strange thing to travel with. He stopped thinking that when he saw the intent behind them. She negotiated by post with the Oats Grain Cooperative in Stratton, and within 2 weeks had arranged the direct purchase she had described at the fence. Heller, the Millbrook merchant, noticed when Nathan stopped buying feed from him. He was not pleased. He made a point of saying so to Nathan in the Millbrook saloon on a supply run. Your city wife thinks she knows more than men who've been doing this 20 years, Heller said. His voice carried the particular edge of a man whose income has just changed without his consent. She knows what things cost in Stratton, Nathan said. And she's my wife, not my city wife. Heller's eyes narrowed. You taking her side against the people who've kept this town together? I'm taking the side of $9, Nathan said, and picked up his supplies and walked out. He told Emma about it that evening, expecting he wasn't sure what. Maybe for her to feel bad about causing trouble. Instead, she looked up from the account book and said, Is Heller on the town council? He is. Then we should expect more pushback, she said. People with interests in keeping things as they are don't enjoy when things change. She paused. I'm sorry if it creates difficulty for you. Don't be. You didn't do anything wrong. She studied him. You stood up for me. I stated facts. In this territory, for a man to state facts on a woman's behalf when she isn't present to hear it, that's standing up for her. She looked at him a moment longer. Thank you. He felt the discomfort of being seen clearly and had no good response to it. You were right about the grain, he said. That's what I stated. She said, and went back to her work. Nathan Cole had the specific experience of a man who has just lost a small argument he had not intended to be having and is not entirely sure he minds. The invisible change was harder to track because it was happening inside Nathan himself. He had lived alone for 7 years. Since his wife Sarah had died of fever in the winter of 1871, he had built around himself gradually, and without full awareness, a certain kind of interior silence. Not depression exactly. He functioned, he worked. He got through days, but a quietness, a careful blankness, a way of not asking too much of any particular moment, because moments had historically taken quite a lot from him. Emma Carter did not respect that silence. She did not assault it. She did not perform warmth at him or demand emotional reciprocation. What she did was simply exist in the same space actively and with intention, and the noise of a full life being lived. The sound of her moving through the house, the smell of actual cooking, replacing his functional subsistence food, the sight of lamplight in the kitchen window. When he came back from the barn late, had begun to erode the edges of the silence, the way water erodes stone. Slowly, without force, inevitably. He noticed it at odd moments. He noticed it when she laughed for the first time, a real laugh surprised out of her by the antics of a young calf that had gotten itself comprehensively stuck in the water trough and was staring at her with an expression of complete indignation. It was a short laugh, quickly suppressed, but it was real, and he found himself standing in the barn doorway, in the full consciousness that the sound had done something to the air around him. He noticed it when she asked about Sarah. It was a week into the second month. They were sitting on the porch after supper, in the brief cool of the evening, which had become without either of them planning it a habit. She had been watching the horizon, and she said quietly, "There's a photograph on the bedroom shelf. Not my room, yours. A woman." He said nothing. "You don't have to tell me," she said. "I'm not asking to pry. I'm asking because I want to understand you better, and photographs tell you things." He was quiet for a long moment. "My wife," he said. "Sarah. She died in 1871. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." "Time doesn't always do what people think it does with grief," Emma said. She said it matter-of-factly, not as a therapeutic observation, but as a simple statement of fact, like saying water is wet. He looked at her. "You sound like you know." "My father died 2 years ago. We were very close." She paused. He was the only person who ever looked at me and saw what I actually was rather than what I was supposed to be. Another pause. I still reach for things to tell him sometimes, things that happen during the day, and then I remember. He was quiet. "That's what grief does," she said. "After a while, it's not a wound. It's just a habit of reaching for someone who isn't there anymore." Nathan Cole looked at the horizon for a long time. "Yes," he said finally. "That's exactly what it is." Emma did not say anything else. She didn't need to. She had said the true thing, and let it be the true thing, without dressing it up or padding it with comfort that he hadn't asked for. He found sitting on that porch in the cooling dark that the silence he had been living in for 7 years had just gotten measurably smaller. He told himself it was proximity. 2 people in a small house. It was natural. He was not entirely convinced by this, but he held on to it anyway. 6 weeks and they had their first real fight. It was about the cattle. Nathan had decided to sell 12 head to cover the next bank installment. It was his instinct: reduce the herd, raise the cash, survive the month. Emma had looked at his math and disagreed. "If you sell 12 now, you bring in $60, she said. "That covers the installment. But in spring, your herd is 26. That's not enough to rebuild from. You're trading long-term recovery for short-term survival." "Short-term survival is keeping the bank from taking the land," Nathan said. What if there's another option? There isn't. You don't know that. What if we go to the bank and renegotiate the payment schedule? I'm not going back to that bank with my hat in my hand. This isn't about your pride, Nathan. I didn't say it was about my pride. The words came out sharper than he intended. Emma looked at him steadily. But it is. You've been here 6 weeks. You don't know everything. I know this. You've been making decisions based on what feels survivable today, without looking at what's survivable in 2 years. That's not bad judgment. It's exhaustion. But I'm not exhausted. I'm looking at 2 years from now, and I'm telling you the picture looks different if you don't sell those 12 cattle. And if the bank says no, we've got nothing. We negotiate. It's what I know how to do. She paused. Nathan, let me try. The silence in the kitchen was the kind that has corners to it. If they say no, he said at last, we sell the 12. Agreed. He looked at her. The certainty in her face was not arrogance. It was a woman who had looked at the numbers long enough to believe them. Fine, he said. 3 days later. Emma Carter walked into the First Territorial Bank of Pueblo County and sat across from the loan officer, a thin, precise man named Aldridge, who had the expression of someone who had heard every frontier hardship story there was, and she laid out a restructured payment plan, with such precision, with such clarity of reasoning, with such a detailed accounting of the ranch's recovery trajectory, that Aldridge agreed to extend the schedule by 8 months. He did not look entirely happy about it, but he agreed. She rode back to the ranch in the late afternoon and found Nathan in the barn and told him in 4 words, 8 months, we're good. Nathan Cole sat down on a hay bale. He sat there for a moment. Then he put his face in his hands. Not with grief, with something that had nowhere else to go. Emma stood in the barn doorway and gave him his moment. Nathan, she said gently. He lifted his face. His eyes were dry. His jaw was working. 8 months, he said. 8 months. He stood. He looked at her. She could see plainly that there were things moving in him, that he did not have the architecture to speak directly, and she did not ask him to. Thank you, he said. We have work to do, she said. He nodded. He picked up his tools. He went back to work. Emma Carter walked out of the barn and stood in the yard for a moment and breathed and looked at the sky and felt for the first time since she'd stood on a wooden platform in Millbrook with the whole town laughing that she was somewhere she was supposed to be. She didn't examine that feeling closely. She went back to the account books, but the feeling stayed. At 7 weeks, something happened that neither of them discussed directly, but that both of them felt. Nathan had been working the north fence after a section collapsed in a night wind, and he had come back to the house at noon to find Emma at the kitchen table with a cloth pressed to her hand, her face composed and careful in the way he had learned meant she was in pain and choosing not to show it. She had cut herself on a broken jar while reorganizing the storage room. It was not serious, but it was bleeding, and she had been managing it alone. He went to the medical kit without asking. He sat across from her at the table, and he cleaned the cut with more gentleness than his hands. Hands built for fence posts, and cattle and hard work, had any obvious right to manage, and she let him, which was its own kind of statement, because Emma Carter did not let people help her easily. He'd observed that clearly enough. She watched his hands while he worked. You're careful, she said. Habit, he said. You get a cut infected out here, you're in trouble. I know. I grew up reading about frontier medicine. My father's trading routes went through areas where infection was common. She paused. That's something I know about. He tied off the cloth he'd wrapped the cut in. He did not let go of her hand immediately. Silence. It lasted only a few seconds, long enough to mean something. Then he released her hand and stood and put the kit away and said practically, keep it dry for 2 days. I will, she said equally practically. He went back out to the fence. Emma Carter sat at the kitchen table for a moment longer than was necessary, looking at the cloth wrapped around her hand. She thought about her father and what he would have said if he could have seen the last 7 weeks. He would have said, there you are, Emma. I was wondering when you'd show up. She stood. She had work to do. The ranch neither of them had fully noticed had begun to feel like something other than a temporary arrangement. That was perhaps the most dangerous thing that had happened since the auction. It was also the best. And neither of them not yet had said a single word about it. The 8 months the bank gave them felt in the first week after Emma returned from Pueblo like something close to breathing room. Not safety. Nathan was too experienced in hard years to mistake relief for safety, but room. Enough room to move to plan, to stop simply reacting to each crisis as it landed, and start doing something that resembled forward motion. Emma did not waste a single day of it. She had a list. She always had a list. Nathan had started to understand that this was not a nervous habit or an anxious personality trait. It was the way her mind worked, the way his hands knew fence wire without having to think about it. She organized through listing the same way he organized through motion. They were different instruments producing the same result. The list had 12 items. She showed it to him at breakfast the Monday after the bank meeting, setting it on the table beside his coffee, like a business proposal, which was essentially what it was. He looked at it. "Number 8, he said. Expand the cattle herd. We just barely kept the 38. In spring, she said. Not now. I put it 8th because it comes after the other 7. Where's the money for spring expansion coming from? Number 4, she said. The vegetable surplus. He looked up at her. The garden, she said. It's producing more than we can use. The trading post in Millbrook pays 8 cents a pound for carrots and 12 cents for beans. I spoke to the owner's wife last week when I was in town. A pause. She was more willing to talk business than her husband would have been. Nathan looked back at the list. You spoke to Clara Briggs. I did. About selling vegetables. About selling vegetables. Yes. When were you in Millbrook last week? Tuesday, when you were working the south pasture. I took the wagon. She said it without apology, because there was nothing to apologize for, and he understood that even as some male instinct he was working to override noticed, she had handled it independently. I should have told you. I'll tell you next time. He drank his coffee. How much surplus are we talking? Enough for a first delivery by end of the month. 60, maybe 70 pounds of carrots, 40 of beans. She paused. It's not a fortune, but it's cash that doesn't touch the cattle or the bank situation. It's a separate line. He was quiet for a moment, working through it. And the orchard, number 11. The apple trees on the east edge of the property. They're neglected but not dead. I've been reading about them. She reached into her bag, the same traveling bag she had carried to the auction, which apparently contained an entire library, along with her seed packets, and set a worn pamphlet on the table. Colorado Territory Orchard Management, 1875. They need pruning and specific care through winter, but if they're properly tended, they begin producing reliably by the second year, which takes us to spring of 1880. That's 2 years out. Yes. You're thinking 2 years out. Someone should, she said, meeting his eyes steadily. Are you opposed? He looked at her across the table. He had the specific experience of a man who has spent 3 years being entirely focused on this week, this month, this payment, and has just had someone unfold a map that showed the territory beyond the next ridge. It was disorienting. It was also, he was aware of this, even as he sat with his coffee, something that felt very close to hope. No, he said. I'm not opposed. He looked back at the list. What's number 12? She hesitated. Just slightly. Just enough to be noticeable. Hire a hand, she said. We can't afford. Not for wages. Not yet. There's a provision under territorial settlement law for labor exchange. Someone works a season in return for food shelter and a small plot of land use. No cash changes hands. I looked it up in the county records. Another pause. You can't work this ranch at full operation alone, Nathan. I can do accounts in the garden and negotiations. I cannot brand cattle or manage the north pasture and the herd simultaneously. You know that's true. The silence that followed had a different quality to it than their usual silences. This one had friction in it. A hand means another person on this land, he said. Yes. Another person I'm responsible for. Under the labor exchange agreement, the responsibility is mutual. It's not charity. Nathan put down his coffee. He looked at his hands for a moment, the scarred, work-thickened hands that had been doing the work of 2 men for 3 years. He knew she was right. He had known it for a long time. Knowing something and being willing to act on it were different instruments, too. "Let me think on it," he said. "Of course," she said. She picked up the list, tucked it into her book, and went to start the morning. She did not press. She had learned quickly, and with the same precision she brought to everything, exactly how far to push Nathan Cole before he closed, and she had not once in 8 weeks crossed that line. He noticed that too. He thought about it more than he should have. The first vegetable delivery to Clara Briggs happened on a Thursday late morning, with Emma driving the wagon herself and Nathan riding alongside, because 3 months of listening to men underestimate her had left him with a persistent instinct to be visibly present when she conducted business in Millbrook. She had told him this was unnecessary. He had come anyway. Clara Briggs was a practical woman in her late 40s who had been running the Trading Post bookkeeping for her husband for 20 years, and was therefore Emma had correctly identified the actual person worth doing business with. She came out to meet the wagon, looked at the produce Emma had packed, and presented with as much care as a banker presents. A contract tasted a carrot without ceremony and said, 8 cents a pound, and I'll take everything you can bring me through October. 9 cents, Emma said. Clara looked at her. 8.5. Done, Emma said, and they shook hands. Nathan sat on his horse and watched this transaction occur entirely without him, and felt simultaneously prouder and more unnecessary than he had in recent memory. Both of those feelings were strange, and one of them was new. It was on the ride back to the ranch that they encountered Victor Langley for the first time. Langley's outfit was unmistakable, the finest horses in the county, a wagon that had not been purchased locally, clothes that said money without announcing it. He was perhaps 50 broad through the chest, with the kind of face that had once been handsome and had since become merely commanding, which was probably what he preferred anyway. He was riding in the opposite direction on the Millbrook Road, and he slowed when he saw them. His eyes went to Nathan, then to Emma, then back to Nathan with an expression Nathan could not quite read. "Cole," Langley said. "Langley," Nathan said. "Heard you got yourself a wife at the summer auction." His gaze moved to Emma again, assessing, the way a buyer looks at stock. Emma held his gaze without difficulty. "Emma Cole," she said. Not Miss Carter, Nathan noted. Not Nathan's wife. Emma Cole stated like a fact that required no supporting evidence. Langley studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. Then he smiled. It was a smooth smile, the kind that had been practiced into looking spontaneous. "Welcome to the Valley, Mrs. Cole," he said. "I'm Victor Langley. I run the largest operation in the county." He said it the way a man puts a card on a table. "If you ever find Cole's Creek isn't working out the way you'd hoped, there's always opportunity for capable people in well-run operations." The words were polite. The meaning underneath them was not. Nathan's hands tightened on his reins. "We're fine at Cole's Creek," he said. "Of course you are," Langley said pleasantly. He tipped his hat to Emma. "Mrs. Cole, enjoy the valley." He rode on. Nathan and Emma were quiet for a long moment after he'd passed. "I don't like him," Emma said. It was said simply, without heat, the same tone she used when she announced that a merchant's pricing was off, an observation based on evidence. "He controls the cattle prices in this county," Nathan said, keeping his voice low, even though Langley was well out of range. "Has for years. He's got arrangements with the Pueblo buyers. Nobody goes around him." Emma was quiet for a moment. "What happens when people try? They find other problems." "What kind of problems?" "The kind that are hard to trace." Emma looked at the road ahead, processing this. "He was assessing me," she said. "Yes, not as a woman, as a variable. Something that changed your situation, and he needed to evaluate the change." Nathan looked at her. He had thought the same thing and had not expected her to. "That's right," he said. "Then he already knows we're doing better than we were," she said. "Word travels in a county this size." "It does." She was quiet for another moment. "Nathan," What happens to Langley's position in this valley if enough smaller ranches recover? He looked at her. His leverage over the cattle prices depends on having producers who can't afford to wait for better offers, she said. Producers who need cash immediately, who have no margin. If the smaller ranches start recovering their margins. She stopped. Let the implication sit. Nathan finished it. He loses control of the price. Yes. A pause. He didn't stop to greet us because he was being friendly. No, Nathan said. He wasn't. They rode the rest of the way to the ranch without speaking, but the silence was a working one, both of them thinking from different angles about the same thing. When they reached the barn and were unhitching the wagon, Emma said, "Is the labor exchange still on the table, the hand you were thinking about?" Nathan looked at her over the back of the horse. "You think we need to be better positioned. I think a man like Langley moves slowly until he doesn't," she said. "And I think being understaffed is a liability we shouldn't keep." He thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. "I'll ask around at church Sunday," he said. Emma nodded once. She went on with the unhitching. Neither of them said this is getting more complicated than a ranch recovery, but they were both thinking it. The hand they found was named Eli Grover, 19 years old, from a family that had come west the previous year and lost their father to a mining accident in April. He had 2 younger siblings, a mother who was doing laundry for other people's households in Millbrook, and the expression of a young man who had been carrying too much too fast and was aware he couldn't put it down. Emma found him at the Sunday church gathering, not by asking around as Nathan had planned, but because she had been watching people the way her father had taught her to watch the trading floor, looking for who was doing the math, who was calibrating, who was trying to appear fine. Eli Grover was trying to appear fine in a way that was very familiar to her. She introduced herself. She explained the arrangement. He said yes before she'd finished explaining. Nathan met him afterward, and they shook hands, and Nathan saw in the young man what Emma had evidently already identified: capability that needed room and need that was making him brittle. "You work hard, you eat well, you have your own space in the bunkhouse," Nathan said. "You learn the operation, you pull your weight, that's the deal." "Yes, sir," Eli said. "Don't call me sir, Nathan." A pause. "Yes, sir, Nathan." Nathan almost smiled. Almost. Start Monday. Eli showed up at sunrise on Monday. He showed up at sunrise every day after that. He was, it turned out, one of those people who worked better when they had structure and expectation, who straightened under responsibility, the way certain plants grow toward light. Nathan taught him the cattle. Emma taught him the accounts. Not all of them, not the sensitive parts, but enough for him to understand how operations worked, which was, Emma had explained to Nathan, how you created someone who cared about the outcome, rather than just performing tasks. "You're training him," Nathan said one evening on the porch, watching through the window as Eli worked through a simple ledger entry Emma had given him. "Yes," she said. "Most people with experience like yours don't bother. Most people with experience like mine haven't needed help badly enough to understand what it means to receive it," she said. Nathan was quiet. "My father trained his workers," she said. "He said the biggest waste in any operation was human capability going unused because nobody bothered to develop it." "Smart man," Nathan said. "The smartest I knew." She paused. "Until recently." The word landed quietly. Nathan kept his eyes on the middle distance and felt it land and said nothing, because saying something would have required acknowledging what it meant, and he wasn't ready for that yet. But it meant something. 2 weeks after Eli's arrival, the ranch hit its first smooth stretch since Emma had come. Not easy. Nothing about a cattle ranch in a drought year was easy, but smooth. The operation was running with something that resembled efficiency. The cattle were healthy. The garden surplus continued. Eli took the east pasture responsibilities without needing to be supervised, which freed Nathan to work on the barn repairs he'd been deferring for 2 years. Emma, with time, created by the improved organization, started something she had not told Nathan about in advance. She had been corresponding. She had written in the weeks since the Langley encounter to 3 other small ranch operations in the county families she had identified through county records and the church community as being in similar positions to Coles Creek, 18 months ago. Struggling. Under pressure. Possibly not aware of resources like the grain cooperative in Stratton, or the labor exchange provision, or the specific bank officer in Pueblo County. Who was it turned out more open to restructuring than his public posture suggested? She had written careful, specific letters. Not charity. Not advice from a position of superiority. Practical information offered plainly. 2 of the 3 had written back. She was reading the second reply at the kitchen table when Nathan came in from the barn, saw the letter and said, "Who's that from?" "The Vickers Ranch, 20 miles north." She looked up. They were 3 months from foreclosure. The bank situation I described applied to them. They're going to Pueblo next week. Nathan sat down slowly. "Emma, it's not your business I'm giving away," she said. "These are methods, information. I'm not directing anyone away from Coles Creek." "That's not what I was going to say." She stopped. "I was going to say—" He paused, and the pause had something working in it, something he was arranging carefully. Why spend your time on people you've never met?" She looked at him for a moment. "Because someone should," she said. "Because the thing that almost destroyed this ranch wasn't drought. It wasn't even Langley's price manipulation. It was isolation. One person alone making decisions without enough information, without support." She paused. "If I can change that for someone else, I should. That's all it is." Nathan Cole looked at his wife, and she was his wife. Whatever the exact nature of that arrangement was still working itself out to be, and felt something in his chest shift in a way that was no longer deniable even to himself. He had spent 7 years living behind a careful interior silence. He was aware, sitting at this table in the evening light, that the silence had somewhere in the last 3 months become very nearly inaudible. He did not say that. He said, "The Hendersons are 2 properties over from Vickers. They're in the same situation. If you're riding north, you might as well write them too." Emma's expression did not change dramatically, but something in it softened. "Do you know them?" she asked. "Knew the father. He died last spring. The son's running it now. 22, maybe 23. Good kid. Doesn't know what he doesn't know." "Do you have their address?" "I know where they are." "Then tell me and I'll write," he told her. She wrote it down. She went back to her letter. Nathan got up to start supper. Behind him he heard the scratch of her pen on paper and the small sounds of the house, doing what houses do when people live in them properly. And he thought about his father, who had told him once that a man's life was only as wide as the people he let into it. He put water on to boil. He had been letting in almost no one for 7 years. The pot began to heat. It was a Thursday evening in the 9th week of their arrangement when Heller, the Millbrook merchant, whose feed pricing Emma had circumvented, came to the ranch unannounced. Nathan heard the horse and went to the door. Heller sat outside on a bay mare with the expression of a man who has worked up something unpleasant and is determined to deliver it. "Cole," he said. "Heller, what brings you out here?" "A conversation." His eyes moved past Nathan to the house, to the lamp in the window. "You and your wife been making changes." "That's what people do when things need changing." "Some changes are well received," Heller said. "Some make problems." A pause. "You started buying from Stratton." "Better price," Nathan said. "The better price is available because Langley lets it be available," Heller said, and his voice had shifted lower, flatter the business voice under the social one. "The cooperative in Stratton runs on terms that Langley's buyers allow. You think that arrangement survives if he decides it shouldn't?" Nathan was quiet. "I'm telling you this as a neighbor," Heller said, "not as a man with a business interest. The valley runs a certain way. It's run that way for 20 years. People who've tried to run it differently have found the next season harder than the one before." "Is that a threat, Heller?" "It's information," Heller said. "Do with it what you like." He turned his horse. "Your wife is smart enough to know when to be careful." He rode off down the dark road. Nathan stood in the doorway for a long moment. Behind him, he heard Emma's voice. "I heard," she said. He turned. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, her face composed and careful in the way that meant she was processing and choosing not to let the processing show. "He's Langley's man," Nathan said. Not necessarily. He might just be a merchant who understands the order of things and doesn't want trouble. She paused. But the message is Langley's. Means Langley's been paying attention. He has been since the road. She was quiet for a moment. Nathan, I need to know something. What? How scared are you? She asked it directly. No softening. Because there's a version of what we've been doing that stops here. Stops at quiet recovery, keeps its head down, doesn't reach further. And there's a version that keeps going. He looked at her. The further version is better for us, she said. And for the Vickers, and the Hendersons, and whoever else. But it draws attention. It already has. More, she said. Sustained attention. The kind that looks for weak points. He was quiet for a long moment. The lamp behind her made her expression hard to read and very easy to read simultaneously. Are you scared? He asked. She considered it honestly. Yes, she said. But I'm more tired of what the alternative costs. Nathan Cole looked at his wife in the lamplight. He thought about $2 silver on an auction table. He thought about 8 months from the bank. He thought about Eli Grover growing into his own capability in the East pasture. He thought about letters going north to the Vickers and the Hendersons. We keep going, he said. Emma held his gaze. Something in her face settled, not relief, but the particular quality of a person who has just had something confirmed they were already fairly sure of, but needed to hear. All right, she said. Then we need to be smarter than we've been. She went back to the kitchen table, opened her notebook. Come sit down. I want to walk through what I think Langley's exposure is, the parts of his operation that depend on the small ranches staying weak. Nathan came and sat. The lamp burned steady. Outside, the Colorado night settled over the property that 2 months ago had been a wreck and was now something else, not yet recovered, not yet safe, but alive in a way it had not been pointed forward with 2 people at a kitchen table working by lamplight on the problem of a powerful man who had just realized they were more dangerous than they looked. Neither of them noticed that they had been sitting at that table together for 3 hours. Neither of them noticed when Nathan's hand reaching across for the notebook she'd pushed toward him covered hers briefly before he picked it up. Both of them noticed. Neither of them said anything. The work went on. The morning after Heller's visit, Emma was up before dawn. Nathan found her at the kitchen table with a map of the county spread flat and waited at the corners with a coffee cup, the account book, a jar of pencils, and the pamphlet on orchard management that had been living on the shelf for 2 months. She had drawn lines on the map, careful, deliberate lines connecting ranch properties across the valley floor. He looked at the map without speaking for a moment. You drew the network, he said. I drew what I think the network could be, she said. The Vickers, the Hendersons, the Pierce family, I found them through county records. They're on the western edge, similar situation to ours 8 weeks ago, and 3 other operations. She pointed to each mark in turn. If these 6 ranches are coordinating buying grain together from Stratton, sharing labor during peak season, presenting a unified front to the Pueblo buyers. Langley cannot control the pricing. He needs individual sellers who are desperate enough to take whatever he offers. He cannot work against 6 operations moving together. Nathan looked at the map. He looked at the lines. He thought about what Heller had said on the road. He'll come at us harder, he said. Yes. And the others, the Vickers, the Hendersons, they didn't sign up for that. They wrote back because they wanted bank advice. I know. She folded her hands on the table. Which is why I'm not going to present this to them as a confrontation with Langley. I'm going to present it as what it actually is, a cooperative buying arrangement. Legal. Common in the eastern states. Unremarkable on its surface. And underneath the surface. Underneath the surface, she said evenly. It's 7 families reclaiming the right to sell their own cattle at a fair price. Nathan sat down across from her. He looked at the map for a long time. Emma, he said, I know what you're going to say. Do you? You're going to say this is bigger than what we planned. That we came into this trying to save one ranch, not reorganize the valley. That's part of it. What's the other part? He was quiet for a moment. The other part is that I'm watching you build something that matters, and I don't want to be the reason you stop." He paused. "But I also won't let you carry the risk of it alone." Emma looked at him across the table. The early light was just beginning at the window. "I'm not alone," she said. He held her gaze. "No," he said. "You're not." They started with the Vickers. Emma wrote a second letter, more specific than the first, laying out the framework of what she was calling, carefully, in deliberately plain language, the Valley Small Ranch Cooperative. She sent it with Eli on a Tuesday, along with a separate note for the Hendersons and a third for the Pierce family she had found in the county records. Eli rode the 20-mile circuit in a day and came back with 3 verbal answers that were in all essential respects the same answer. Yes. When do we start? Nathan received this news on the porch, where he'd been repairing the railing gap that had been open since before Emma arrived, working with the careful attention of a man who is doing something ordinary while waiting for something significant. "All 3, he said. "All 3. Eli confirmed, still slightly out of breath from the ride. Mrs. Vickers cried, not sad crying, the other kind. Nathan looked at Emma. Emma was looking at the map in her hand. He could not entirely read her expression. It was the face she wore when something had worked that she had needed to work, but underneath the composure was something unguarded. Something that looked like it might be joy, if joy were the kind of thing Emma Carter allowed herself to display in full. "Good," she said. "Tell them we'll meet at the church hall in Millbrook on Saturday morning. I'll bring the framework documents." Eli nodded and went to put up his horse. Nathan waited until he was out of earshot. "You already wrote the framework documents," he said. "I wrote a draft," she said. "When last week? Before the letters went out?" "Yes." He looked at her. "You were fairly confident they'd say yes." "I was confident the situation was bad enough that reasonable people would recognize a reasonable solution." She paused. "And I was fairly confident." This time he did not suppress what threatened to become a smile. It arrived briefly, and she saw it, and something in her expression answered it before she looked back at the map. The Saturday meeting happened in the church hall with 7 people around a table. Nathan and Emma, the Vickers couple. Young Daniel Henderson, who was 23 and had his dead father's handshake and his mother's jaw. The Pierce family's eldest daughter, Rosalind, who was running the property since her husband broke his leg in April, and a man named Callum Trace from the far western property who Emma had not contacted, but who had heard through Daniel Henderson and ridden over uninvited. Emma liked him immediately. People who showed up uninvited to useful things were her kind of people. She laid out the cooperative framework in 40 minutes. Clear, specific, practical. No speeches. No sentiment. The numbers did the speaking: what each family was currently paying for grain versus what they would pay buying collectively from Stratton, what the Pueblo market price was versus what Langley's arrangement had been extracting, what the difference looked like over a full season. The room was quiet, in the way rooms go quiet when mathematics makes the case more powerfully than rhetoric. Daniel Henderson spoke first. "This is legal, all of it." "Every part," Emma said. "I've checked it against territorial commercial statutes." "Langley won't like it." "No," Emma said. "He won't." "What does he do when he doesn't like something?" She looked at Nathan. "He makes the next season harder," Nathan said. "That's been the pattern." "How much harder?" Rosalind Pierce asked. She was direct, practical, unbothered by the question's implications. "Harder than this cooperative makes it easier," Emma said, "is not something I can guarantee. I won't pretend the risk is zero. But I can tell you what staying as we are costs, and it costs more every year." The room took that in. Callum Trace, who had not been invited, and who had the look of a man who had spent years making decisions alone in difficult terrain, said, "I'm in." After that, it went quickly. They signed the framework document, all 7 of them, including Nathan, who signed last and without drama, just his name on the line. But Emma noticed that his hand was steady, and his jaw was set with something that looked like conviction. They were on the road home by noon. Eli rode ahead, scouting from habit. Nathan and Emma drove the wagon, and for the first mile they were quiet in the way that follows something significant, letting it settle. "You know," Nathan said finally. When I put $2 on that table in Millbrook, I thought I was doing something small. Emma looked at him. I was trying to end a bad moment, he said. That's all. Get someone off a platform. Get home before dark. I know, she said. I didn't account for. He stopped, started again. I didn't know who you were, what you were capable of. Neither did I, she said. Not entirely, not until I had room to find out. A pause. You gave me room. That was the thing you actually did, Nathan. Not the $2, the room. He kept his eyes on the road. That was all I had to give at the time, he said quietly. It was everything, she said. It was exactly everything. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was the kind of silence that is not empty. It was full of things that did not need saying to be understood. It was 3 days after the Millbrook meeting when the first trouble came. Nathan rode out at dawn to check the herd and found 17 cattle missing from the north pasture. Not dead gone. The fence on the far north edge had been cut. Cleanly, deliberately, with a tool not broken by pressure. He rode back to the house at speed and found Emma in the garden and said without preamble, 17 head, north fence cut. Emma set down the trowel she was holding. Her face went still. When, she said. Overnight, after I checked at 9. Eli. Sleeping. He didn't hear anything. Nobody did. Emma stood. How many does that leave us? 21, plus the 6 calves. She was doing the math in her head, and he could see it working behind her eyes fast and precise. That's not a random theft, she said. No, he said. It's not. It's calculated. Enough to hurt, but not enough to collapse us immediately. Enough to send a message. Yes. She looked at him. Nathan, we have to report it. To who Sheriff Dunbar is Langley's cousin by marriage. Emma took that in. Then we documented ourselves, every detail, witness statements, the state of the fence, everything. She was already moving toward the house. And we tell the cooperative members today, if he's starting with us, they need to know. Nathan caught her arm as she passed him, not to stop her, to ground the moment. Emma, he said. She stopped. Are you all right? He asked. She looked at him. The question had caught her off guard. He could see that she was so constantly oriented toward the practical that the personal question landed sideways. I'm angry, she said honestly. And she stopped. What? Scared, she said. For you, for the ranch, for what we've built. She said it plainly without apology. But I'm not stopping. I know, he said. He released her arm. Go write the report. I'll write out and get exact count. She nodded. She went inside. Nathan stood in the yard for a moment after she'd gone and thought about 17 cattle and cut fence wire and Victor Langley's smooth smile on the Millbrook Road, and felt the slow-burning coal of his anger stoke itself a few degrees hotter. He rode north. The stolen cattle were never recovered, which was, they both understood the intended message. A man with Langley's connections could move 17 head in a night and have them 30 miles away and rebranded by morning. Sheriff Dunbar received Nathan's formal complaint with the expression of a man reading a document in a language he has chosen not to understand and filed it in a drawer that was clearly where things went to be forgotten. Nathan came home from the sheriff's office with his jaw set and his hands controlled with the particular effort of a man who has learned to keep his temper as an act of strategy rather than absence of feeling. Emma looked at him when he walked in. Filed and forgotten, he said. I expected that, she said. Come look at this. He came to the table. She had a fresh document laid out, detailed, organized with dates and witness marks, and a careful accounting of everything that had happened. I'm sending copies of this to the county land office in Denver, she said, and to the territorial newspaper, and to every member of the cooperative. You think that does anything? It creates a record, she said. Langley's system depends on each incident looking individual. Isolated misfortune. If there's a documented pattern. She stopped. He escalates, Nathan said. He might. Her voice was steady. But a documented pattern also means that when he does escalate, there's context. There are witnesses who already know the history. She looked at him. Nathan, men like Langley are very powerful right up until they're not. What changes is when enough people stop being individually afraid and start being collectively inconvenient. He looked at the document. Send it, he said. She sent it. The next 2 weeks were quiet, in the way a sky is quiet before weather. The cooperative's first joint grain purchase from Stratton came through, and the savings were real and immediate enough that Daniel Henderson sent a note that was 2 sentences of practical information, and 1 sentence that said simply, "My mother says to thank Mrs. Cole." I second that. Emma read it twice, and then folded it and put it in her book, which Nathan noticed and said nothing about. Eli repaired the north fence with reinforced posts and a second wire run higher than standard, and Nathan began sleeping lighter, which Emma noticed, and which manifested in her own sleep, becoming lighter in turn, and neither of them mentioned this to the other. The orchard trees on the east edge received their first proper pruning, which Emma had researched with the pamphlet and supplemented with a letter to an agricultural extension office in Denver that had replied with specific instructions and a small bag of recommended treatment powder. They'll produce in 18 months, she told Nathan. After the pruning was done, her hands dirty and her hair escaping its pins in 3 directions, which was the state she was in when she'd been working hard and had stopped caring about appearances, which Nathan had observed was also when she was most entirely herself. "You're sure," he said, reasonably. She looked at the trees. "They've been neglected, not killed. There's a difference." He looked at the trees, too. Then at her. "Yes," he said. "There is." She turned, found him looking at her with the particular expression that had been appearing more frequently, focused, undefended, too direct to be accidental. "What?" she said. "Nothing," he said. He went back to work. Emma Carter stood among the pruned orchard trees and felt the particular frustration of a woman who is very good at reading numbers and somewhat less practiced at reading the thing that was currently happening in her chest every time Nathan Cole looked at her that way. She went back to work too. The second incident happened on a Thursday 4 weeks after the cattle theft. The hay reserve. Nathan smelled it before he saw it. The particular thick char smell that woke him at 2 in the morning with his heart already going and his boots already in his hand before he was fully conscious. He hit the porch running and saw the orange light against the night sky from the direction of the hay barn. He shouted for Eli. He ran. Emma was 30 seconds behind him. She had come awake at his boots on the porch and was out the door before she'd made any conscious decision about it. They fought it for 2 hours. Nathan and Eli with wet burlap and the water from the livestock troughs, and Emma working the pump with methodical intensity that went beyond fear into something purer and more functional, the way she got when things needed doing, and the only available option was to do them. They saved the barn. They lost roughly half the hay inside it. At 4 in the morning, they stood in the yard, all 3 of them covered in soot and sweat and the chemical exhaustion of 2 hours of sustained physical fear, and looked at what remained. Eli said, "It started from the outside. There's a burn line on the south wall." Nathan said nothing. Emma said, "Is anyone hurt?" "No," Nathan said. "Then the accounting is bad, but survivable." Her voice was completely flat, not cold, but stripped of everything that wasn't necessary. She was managing herself the way she managed a crisis ledger, 1 line at a time. "We need to assess what we have. Eli, can you do a count of the remaining bales at first light?" "Yes, ma'am." "Nathan." She turned to him. "I was looking at the barn, at what was left of it and what wasn't." His face in the gray pre-dawn was a thing she had not seen before. Not anger, which she knew, not the suppressed grief she had glimpsed in unguarded moments, but something older and more settled than either. The look of a man measuring the distance between where he stands and where his limit is, and finding the distance smaller than it used to be. "Nathan," she said again, quietly. He looked at her. "We're still here," she said. His jaw worked. "Yes," he said. "We are. That's what matters tonight. Everything else is a problem for morning." He looked at her for a long moment. Something passed through his expression, fast, contained, real. "Come inside," she said. "I'll make coffee. We sleep 2 hours, then we start." He nodded. They went inside. By morning, the cooperative members knew. Nathan had not sent word. Emma had at 6 a.m. with Eli as the writer. A note going to each family. Not an alarm. A report. The same tone as her letters to the bank. By noon, Callum Trace arrived uninvited. He brought 50 bales of hay from his own reserve, loaded in his wagon, driven 20 miles before breakfast. He set them down without ceremony. "You'd do it for me," he said to Nathan. Nathan looked at the hay, at Callum. "I would," he said. By the following day, the Vickers had sent 30 bales, and Daniel Henderson had ridden over himself with his 2 hired men and spent the day reinforcing the barn's outer walls with additional timber. Emma watched this happen with the particular expression of a person who has made a calculation and is watching the result confirm itself. "The cooperative," Nathan said. "The cooperative," she said. "This is what you built it for." She was quiet for a moment. "I built it because it was the right structure. I didn't know what it would feel like when it worked." "What does it feel like?" She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. "Like the thing my father always tried to tell me about," she said. "That individual resources are finite. Collective ones aren't." Nathan looked at her. "He sounds like he was worth knowing," he said. "He was," she said. A pause. "I think he would have liked you," she said. She said it simply without weight, looking at the reinforced barn wall where Daniel Henderson's men were finishing the last brace. Nathan felt the words go somewhere inside him that he had not opened in a very long time. "That means something," he said. "I meant it to," she said. They stood together in the yard, looking at the barn that should have been a death blow and wasn't, and the hay that had come from 20 miles away in a neighbor's wagon before noon, and neither of them touched the other, but the space between them had become somewhere in the course of 3 months and 2 crises, and a kitchen table, and an orchard, and a cooperative, and a cut fence, and a fire. Something that was very close to the opposite of space. It was 4 days after the fire that the letter arrived. It came through the Millbrook post addressed to Emma Cole. No return name, the handwriting precise and controlled in a way that suggested deliberate disguise. She opened it at the kitchen table, while Nathan was in the barn, and read it once, then set it flat on the table, and read it again. Then she sat very still for approximately 30 seconds. Nathan came in an hour later and found her at the table with the letter in front of her, her hands folded on top of it, her face doing the thing it did when something very significant was being very carefully held. "What is it?" he said immediately. She looked up. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She moved her hands. He picked up the letter and read it. It was short, 8 lines, unsigned. The first 4 lines described the Millbrook auction in specific detail, not the public events, but the private ones. Names, payments. A meeting described precisely that had taken place 2 nights before the auction, in the back room of Heller's store, attended by Victor Langley, and 4 men, Emma recognized as local landowners. The subject of that meeting, identifying which women in the upcoming auction should be made unmarketable. Creating the conditions for humiliation so that certain women could be acquired cheaply afterward for specific purposes. Emma's name was on a list. The next 4 lines explained why. Langley had wanted labor for a domestic operation on his property. Not a wife, not an equal. A woman with bookkeeping skills, who had no social standing, no husband, no protection, who would have no recourse and no leverage. The plan after the auction had been to approach her privately, offer her a position, frame it as charity. The letter ended with 2 words: "Leave now." Nathan put this letter down. The kitchen was very quiet. "He planned it," Nathan said. His voice came out at a register Emma had not heard from him before. Very low, very controlled. "He planned it," she confirmed. "The humiliation, the entire auction. He paid those men to make sure nobody bid. So that afterward I would have nowhere to go and no options." She paused. "He didn't expect you." Nathan looked at the letter on the table. His hands on either side of it were flat and still, with the kind of stillness that costs considerable effort. "The letter is unsigned," Emma said. "Someone inside Langley's operation who knows the details. which means the details are documented somewhere, which means this can be proven, Nathan said. With the right pressure in the right places, yes. She met his eyes. This changes the nature of what we're dealing with, Nathan. He didn't come after us because the cooperative threatened his cattle prices. He came after us because I'm here instead of where he planned me to be, and the cooperative is collateral damage to his real problem. Nathan stood. He pushed back from the table and stood with his back to her for a moment, and she could see in the line of his shoulders the full weight of what was moving through him. The anger. Yes, but underneath the anger, something rawer and more specific. The specific fury of a man who has understood in one moment the full scope of what a woman he cares about has been subjected to. He turned. "Emma," he said. "I'm not leaving," she said before he could form whatever he was about to say. "That's not—" "I know what the letter says. I'm not leaving." She stood too. "I want to be very clear about that. Not because I have nowhere to go. Because this is where I'm staying." He looked at her across the table. "I know," he said quietly. "That's not what I was going to say either." "What were you going to say?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked at the letter. He looked at her. "I was going to say that I'm sorry," he said. "That a man did that to you. That an entire room of men let him. That you stood on that platform and the whole town laughed, and not one person—" He stopped. His jaw was working. "I was going to say that you deserved better than what that day was, and that I'm glad you're here, and that whatever comes next from Langley, you don't face it alone." Emma Carter stood across the kitchen table from Nathan Cole and felt the very last of a wall she had been maintaining carefully and for a long time become completely unnecessary. She did not cry. She was not a crier by nature or by practice, but her voice when she spoke was different than it had been. "Nathan," she said. "Yes." "Thank you." He nodded once. They stood there for a moment, the letter between them and the weight of it, and 3 months of everything that had been building between them, and the particular quality of a situation that has just become something other than what either person initially understood it to be. "We take this to the cooperative," Emma said finally. Her voice had steadied. "And to Denver, the land office and the territorial paper. Langley's run this valley by keeping each problem looking separate. This letter makes the pattern visible." "He'll know someone talked," Nathan said. "He'll come harder." "Yes," she said. "Let him." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his hat. "I'll get Eli," he said. "We're going to need to ride." He walked out. Emma picked up the letter. Read it one more time. Folded it with precise, careful hands and placed it inside her account book where she kept everything that mattered. Then she went to get her coat. Outside she could hear Nathan's voice and Eli's answering, and the sound of horses being prepared, and the ordinary urgent sounds of people who have decided what they're doing next and are doing it. The valley lay quiet around the ranch. It would not stay quiet long. They rode to Callum Trace's property first because it was closest, and because Callum Emma had decided early was the cooperative member most likely to understand the full scope of what the letter meant without requiring careful framing. She was right. Callum read the letter standing in his yard holding it with both hands, and when he finished, he looked up at Nathan with an expression that had gone very flat and very still. "He ran the auction," Callum said. "He ran the selection," Emma said. "He identified women he wanted to make unmarketable. He paid men to ensure nobody bid. The plan was to approach them afterward individually, with nowhere to go and no leverage. And you ended up at Coles Creek instead." "Yes." Callum was quiet for a moment. "Do you know who sent the letter?" "No. Someone inside his operation who has access to the meeting records." "Which means the records exist." "Which means the records exist," Emma confirmed. Callum handed the letter back. He looked at Nathan. "How bad does it get if you push this into the open?" "Bad," Nathan said. "But it's already bad. The question is whether we let him control the terms." Callum Trace was quiet for 10 seconds, long enough to be a real decision, not a reflexive one. Then, "What do you need from me?" "Your name," Emma said. "On a formal complaint to the Territorial Land Office in Denver. You and every other member of the cooperative. Individual complaints disappear." Collective ones are harder to make disappear. You've drafted it already, Callum said. It wasn't a question. On the ride over, she said. Callum made a sound that was not quite a laugh. All right, he said. Show me where to sign. By the end of that day, they had 5 signatures. Daniel Henderson signed without reading past the 3rd line, looked up and said, "Tell me what you need and when." Rosalind Pierce read every word, asked 2 precise questions, received 2 precise answers, and signed with a hand that did not shake. The Vickers signed together, sitting side by side, their pens moving in the same moment, like people who have been making decisions in tandem long enough that they no longer need to consult first. The 6th signature was the one Emma had not expected. She was not expecting Clara Briggs. Nathan and Emma arrived back in Millbrook at dusk to pick up a supply order, and Clara Briggs came out of the trading post before they had tied off the horses and said in a low voice that carried the specific tone of a woman who has been waiting to say something for some time. "Come inside, both of you, now." They came inside. Clara closed the door. She turned the sign to closed. "I know about the letter," she said. Emma went still. "How?" "Because my husband was in that back room." Clara's voice was controlled in the way that iron is controlled. It has force inside it that the surface is managing. 2 nights before the auction. He didn't tell me what for. He told me it was a business meeting with Langley. I found out the rest 6 weeks ago when a man came looking for a payment my husband had received and thought I should know about. She looked at Emma directly. "I've been trying to find a way to say this to you for 6 weeks, Clara said. "Every time you've come into the post I have started and stopped." Her jaw was tight. "I am sorry. For what was done. For what my husband was part of. For the fact that I didn't know and couldn't stop it." Emma looked at the woman across from her. The apology was real. She could hear the weight of 6 weeks in it. "You didn't do it," Emma said. "My husband did." "Does he know you're telling me this?" Clara's expression did not change. "He does not. And he won't, because I handle the accounts for this business, and I have documentation of the payment he received from Langley that I have not mentioned to anyone yet." She paused. "Until now." Emma understood. "You want to give that documentation to us. I want to give it to whoever can put it in front of someone with authority to act on it," Clara said. "The Territorial Court in Denver, the Land Commission. Anyone who is not connected to Langley's pocket in this county." She paused. "That evidence combined with whatever you have, it's not just a complaint anymore. It's a provable case." Nathan, who had been standing quietly by the door, said, "Clara, what happens to you if Heller finds out?" Clara Briggs looked at him with the expression of a woman who has already worked through every consequence and made her peace with them. "My situation with my husband has not been good for some time," she said. "This is not the only thing he's done that he hasn't told me about. I've been managing accounts long enough to see the differences between what he says and what the numbers show." She straightened. "I'm not doing this to destroy him. I'm doing it because what was done to that woman was wrong, and I had a chance to do something about it, and not doing it was eating me alive." She reached under this counter and produced a folded document, crisp, specific, dated. A record of payment from Langley to Heller. Dated 2 days before the auction. She set it on the counter. Emma picked it up. She read it. She looked up at Clara. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," Clara said. "Just make sure it goes somewhere it counts." They were back on the road. Within 20 minutes, the document folded inside Emma's coat alongside the original letter, and Emma was already thinking 3 steps ahead, in the way she thought, when something had broken open, and the path forward was suddenly both clearer and more dangerous. "Denver," Nathan said from beside her on the wagon seat. "Denver," she confirmed. "We need a lawyer or a land commissioner who isn't connected to Langley's arrangements. And we need to go before he finds out we have this. He'll find out fast. Heller talks. Then we go tomorrow." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "That's a 2-day ride." "I know." "The ranch." "Eli can manage 2 days," she said. "And Callum said he'd check in." Another pause. "Emma." "What?" He glanced at her sideways. "You're not even a little bit afraid." She was quiet for a moment. "I'm extremely afraid," she said. I'm just also extremely clear about what needs doing, and the fear doesn't change the need. She looked at the road ahead. My father used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding the thing in front of you matters more than the fear does. Nathan was quiet. He was a wise man, he said. He was, she said. They rode in silence for a mile. Tell me something about him, Nathan said. Something specific, not a lesson. Something that happened. Emma looked at him, surprised by the request. Then she thought for a moment. When I was 16, she said, he let me negotiate a purchase of trading stock from a supplier in Denver. By myself. The supplier was a man who had been dealing with my father for years, and he assumed he was dealing with a girl who didn't know the price. She paused. I knew the price. I knew it better than he did, because I'd been doing the accounts for 2 years. I got the stock at 11% below what my father had ever paid. What did your father say? He said, you were right, and you knew you were right. That's worth more than the 11%. She was quiet for a moment. It was the first time someone told me that knowing something and trusting what you know are different skills, and both of them matter. Nathan drove the wagon for a mile without speaking. You knew you were right about this ranch, he said. I suspected, she said. I trusted the suspicion. There's a difference. You were right. We were right, she said. It wasn't only my work. He looked at her. Nathan, she said, and her voice had shifted to the register she used when she was going to say something directly that most people would have circled around. You know what happened in that kitchen 3 nights ago? He kept his eyes on the road. When you told me what you were sorry for, she said. What you said. I know what I said. Do you know what it meant to me? A long pause. Tell me, he said. His voice had gone quieter. It meant that someone saw the thing that happened to me and called it by its right name, she said. Without softening it. Without making it about themselves. Without asking me to move past it before I was ready. She paused. You've done that from the beginning. The auction, the ride home, the first night, all of it. You've always looked at what was actually there. Another pause. That is a rare thing, Nathan. In a person. In a man. It's the rarest thing. The wagon moved through the dark road. Emma, he said. Yes. I need to tell you something. He stopped. Then tell me. He was quiet for long enough that she thought he might not. Then, when I put those $2 on the table, I told myself it was because I couldn't stand watching it. And that was true, but it wasn't all of it. She waited. I'd seen you, he said. Before they started dropping the price. Before the crowd started laughing. I'd been at the back of that square for maybe 5 minutes, and I saw you on the platform, and I... He stopped again. I can't explain it clearly. I looked at you, and something in me recognized something. I don't know a better word than that. Emma held very still. I thought I was past that, he said. After Sarah. I thought that part of me had finished. He looked ahead at the dark road. I was wrong. Silence. Nathan, she said softly. I know this isn't, we haven't discussed. Nathan, she said again, and something in the way she said it stopped him. He looked at her. I stopped planning to leave, she said, the 3rd week. I told myself it was because the work was compelling and the ranch had real potential. That was true. She paused. It wasn't all of it. He held her gaze for a long moment. The wagon had slowed without either of them directing it. All right, he said quietly. All right, she said. That was the conversation. No declarations, no formality. Just 2 people who had been talking around something for 3 months, finally stating plainly that the thing was there and that they both knew it, and that the knowing was enough for now. He reached across and took her hand. She did not pull away. They drove the rest of the way to the ranch, with his hand covering hers on the seat between them, and neither of them spoke, and there was nothing left to say that was more important than the silence. They left for Denver at first light. Eli had been briefed the night before with the thoroughness Emma brought to every briefing. What to watch, what to do. If anything happened, which cooperative member to contact first, in what order to contact the others. Eli had listened with the focused expression of a young man who had been trusted with real responsibility enough times now to know what it looked like and how to carry it. "Nothing's going to happen in 2 days," Eli said. "Probably not," Emma said. "But if it does, Callum Trace first, then Henderson, then the others. Don't touch anything that looks like evidence of interference. Document everything. Don't let anyone on the property who doesn't state their name and business clearly." He paused. "And keep the north fence line checked morning and evening." Emma looked at him. "You'll be fine," she said. "Yes, ma'am," Eli said. He looked at Nathan. "Bring her back safe." Nathan looked at the young man he'd hired on a labor exchange 3 months ago, who had arrived with the expression of someone who had been carrying too much too fast, and who now stood in the yard of a functioning ranch with the particular quality of a person who has found the right place for their particular weight. "I will," Nathan said. The road to Denver was long and cold, and they drove it in stages, stopping at a way station midday, and the conversation between them had shifted since the night before into something more direct and more comfortable simultaneously. The guardedness that had been in both of them, his of grief and solitude, hers of judgment and dismissal, had not disappeared. People do not lose their history in one evening. But the walls had dropped low enough that they were talking over them instead of around them. She told him about Denver, about her father's trading company, about the years of sitting in on negotiations as a child and pretending to read while actually listening to every word. He told her about Sarah, and not in the careful way he had managed before this time, with more detail, more color. How she had laughed, how she had argued, how her death had been very fast, and he had not been prepared for how it would empty a house of its sounds. "I stopped listening for sounds," he said. "It was easier." "And now," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "The house is full of sound again," he said. She looked at him. "Yes," she said softly. "It is." They reached Denver in the late afternoon of the second day, and found the Territorial Land Office on Market Street, with 40 minutes to spare before it closed, which was exactly the kind of arrival that Emma had calculated for. Nathan had stopped being surprised by her calculations. The land commissioner was a man named Arthur Graves, 50s, unhurried with the expression of a bureaucrat who has been promised significant things by significant people, often enough to have developed a specific resistance to significance. He took the letter. He took Clara Briggs's documentation. He read both with the thoroughness of a man whose job requires him to read things he doesn't want to be responsible for knowing. Then he looked up. "This is a serious allegation," he said. "It is," Emma said. "It's also a documented one." "The documentation is from a partial witness." "The documentation is a financial record from the man who received payment. The letter corroborates the mechanism. Combined with the cattle theft and the arson at Coles Creek, which are separately documented, they establish a pattern of conduct that your office has jurisdiction over under the Territorial Commerce Statutes of 1872. Graves looked at her. He looked at Nathan. He looked back at her. "Mrs. Cole," he said carefully, "are you trained in law?" "I'm trained in trading law and contract management," she said, "which is the relevant category here. But I'll note that you don't have to take my reading of the statutes. You have your own counsel." Graves was quiet for a moment. "Langley has considerable relationships in this territory." "I'm aware," Emma said. "I'd like you to consider the relationships that will be relevant if this documentation becomes public through the territorial press without first being addressed through proper channels." She paused. "I've been in correspondence with a journalist at the Rocky Mountain News for the past 2 weeks. He's been following the pattern of incidents in our valley with considerable interest." This was in fact true. Emma had written to the paper 3 weeks ago, laying out the pattern with the same precision she used for everything. The journalist had written back once. It was not a commitment to publish, but it was, as she had understood correctly, a card she could lay on a territorial commissioner's desk. Graves looked at the documentation again. "I'll need a week," he said. "You have until Friday of this week," Emma said, "before I respond to the journalist's follow-up letter." Nathan, sitting to her left, kept his expression neutral, with considerable effort. Graves looked at Emma Carter Cole with the expression of a man who has spent his professional life dealing with frontier men and their considerable demands, and has just encountered something categorically different, for which he was not entirely prepared. "Thursday," he said. "Thursday is fine," Emma said. They shook hands. They left. On the steps of the land office, Nathan stopped walking. Emma stopped too, turned. He was looking at her with an expression she had not seen before, not the heat of the kitchen, the night they discussed the letter, not the quiet of the wagon, but something that was all of those things together and slightly more. "The journalist," he said. "Real," she said. "One letter, one reply. I didn't lie to him." "You just applied pressure." "I applied context," she said. "There's a difference." He looked at her for a long moment. Then on the steps of the Territorial Land Office in Denver, in the middle of the afternoon. Nathan Cole put his hand against Emma's face, tilted her chin up, and kissed her. It was not a tentative kiss. It was the kiss of a man who has made up his mind and is no longer in any doubt about what he is doing. Emma, for approximately 1 second, was completely still. Then she kissed him back. When they separated, she looked at him. Her composure was for possibly the first time since he had known her genuinely disrupted. "That was," she started. "Overdue," he said. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "It was." They walked back to the hotel, where they had arranged rooms, and the city moved around them, and neither of them spoke about it directly again that evening, because there are things that don't need to be spoken about to be fully understood. But when he said good night at her door, she held his hand for a moment before she let go. And he stood in the hallway for a moment after her door closed. And both of them on opposite sides of a door. In a Denver hotel, felt the same thing, the specific piece of a thing that has been uncertain, becoming finally certain. They were on the road back by Thursday morning. Commissioner Graves's written acknowledgement of receipt in Emma's bag, along with his commitment to open a formal inquiry into the commerce practices of Victor Langley in the Valley Territory. It was not a conviction. It was not even a guarantee. But it was a formal record signed by a territorial official that the pattern existed and was being examined. It was, as Emma explained to Nathan on the road home, the thing that changed the calculus. "Langley's power is invisible," she said. "It works because each individual incident looks unrelated. The moment it's named as a pattern in official documentation, it stops being invisible. And men whose power depends on invisibility become exposed," Nathan said. "Become vulnerable to every person who's been quiet because they thought no one was watching." Nathan was quiet. "The writer in Denver," he said. "Are you going to respond to him?" "Yes," she said. "I was going to anyway. This week I have more to tell him." He drove for a while. "What do you think Langley does when the inquiry notice arrives?" he said. "He's smart enough to know that violence after a formal complaint goes directly to evidence," she said. "He might try legal means to discredit the documentation. He might try to buy silence from Clara or the letter writer." She paused. "He might try to hurt us in a way that can't be traced, which is what he's been doing. Except now there's a commissioner's office watching." She paused. "Nathan, I want to be honest with you. This isn't over. I know. It might get harder before it gets easier. I know that too." She looked at him. "Are you afraid?" He thought about it with the honesty she had always brought out in him. "Yes," he said. "But I'm more clear than I am afraid, same as you." She looked at him for a long moment. "Good," she said. They were 20 miles from home when they saw the smoke. Emma saw it first. She sat forward on the wagon seat, and her body went rigid, and Nathan followed her gaze and felt his stomach drop in a way that he recognized from the night of the fire. It was coming from the direction of Coles Creek. He pushed the horses. The smoke, as they closed, the distance changed, character thicker in some moments, thinner in others. Not a single sustained burn. Something else. Nathan drove at full pace, and Emma held the seat rail, and neither of them spoke, because they were both doing the same thing, which was not allowing themselves to arrive before they arrived. They came over the last rise and saw the ranch below. The house was standing. The barn was standing. The cattle were visible in the south pasture. But the north fence, the reinforced fence, Eli had rebuilt with doubled posts, was down across a 30-yard section. And Eli Grover was standing in the yard with his hands at his sides and a cut above his left eye, and the particular expression of a young man who has been through something and is holding himself together by deliberate force of will. Nathan pulled the horses to a stop. He was off the wagon before it fully settled. "Eli," he said. "I'm all right," Eli said immediately. "It's not as bad as it looks." Emma came around the wagon. She looked at the cut above his eye, then at the fence, then back at Eli. "What happened?" she said. Her voice was very quiet. "3 men," Eli said. "This morning, maybe 4 hours ago. They came to the north fence. I saw them from the pasture. I rode over and told them they were on private property. One of them, the one who did the talking, said they were just passing through. But they weren't," Emma said. "They put the fence down while I watched. Deliberate. They had tools. I told them to stop. They—" He paused. "One of them pushed me off my horse." He said it without shame, just factually. "I'm not a fighter, Mrs. Cole. I got up and I stood my ground, but there were 3 of them and they knew it." "Did they take anything?" Nathan said. "No, that's the thing." Eli met his eyes. "They didn't take anything. They just put the fence down, looked at me. And the one who did the talking said to tell Mr. Cole that things can get taken away faster than they're built." Nathan was very still. "He used those exact words," Emma said. "Yes, ma'am, exact." Emma and Nathan looked at each other. It was a message. Not a theft, not another fire. A message. "We know you went to Denver. We are telling you we know. We are showing you we can still reach you." Emma turned back to Eli. "Sit down. Let me look at that cut." "It's fine." "Eli." She said his name with the particular firmness she used when she was not negotiating. "Sit." He sat. She cleaned the cut with the kit Nathan brought from the house, her hands efficient and her face composed, but Nathan, watching her from across the yard, could see what was underneath the composure. He had learned over 4 months to read what Emma Carter didn't put on the surface. She was not scared of the message. She was furious about Eli. When she had finished and sent Eli inside to rest, she stood in the yard and looked at the downed fence for a long moment. Nathan came to stand beside her. "He hurt a 19-year-old boy," she said. Her voice was flat. "To send a message to us." "Yes. That's who he is." She turned and looked at Nathan. Not a businessman protecting his interests. A man who hurts whoever is standing between him and what he wants. "Yes," Nathan said. "Then we stop treating this like a commerce dispute," Emma said. "We take everything to the Denver paper, the letter, Clara's documentation, Graves's inquiry, acknowledgement, the cattle theft records, the fire report, and what happened today." She paused. "Daylight. That's the only thing that works on a man like this. Full daylight." Nathan looked at his wife. He thought about a woman on an auction platform in Millbrook. He thought about $2 silver. I thought about the long road from that moment to this yard, and what had been built here, and the particular quality of a thing that has cost enough to make it worth protecting. "Write the letter to Denver tonight," he said. "I already started it in my head on the ride," she said. He looked at her. "Emma," he said. She turned. "He picked the wrong woman," Nathan said. Something crossed her face, fast, fierce, real. "He picked the wrong ranch," she said. They went inside. The lamp came on in the window. And somewhere 20 miles away, Victor Langley's messenger would arrive home and report what had been seen. 2 people pulling up to a damaged fence, assessing the damage going inside, and turning on the light. Not running, not collapsing, just continuing. Which was in the end the most dangerous thing they could have done. Emma wrote the letter to Denver that night. She wrote it at the kitchen table, while Nathan sat across from her, reading the account books, and Eli slept in the bunkhouse with a clean bandage above his eye, and she wrote it the way she wrote everything that mattered, without ornamentation, without appeal to sentiment, without anything that could be dismissed as emotional rather than factual. Just the record, just the pattern. Every incident dated and described. Every document named and attached. The auction manipulation. The cattle theft. The fire. Clara Briggs's financial record. The commissioner's inquiry acknowledgement. And today, 3 men, a downed fence, a 19-year-old boy with a cut above his eye, and a message delivered in exact words. She finished it past midnight. She read it back once. Then she folded it, sealed it, addressed it to James Whitfield at the Rocky Mountain News in Denver, and set it on the table where she would see it first thing in the morning. Nathan looked at the sealed envelope. When does he receive it? 4 days if Eli rides it to the Stratton post office tomorrow morning. She paused. Whitfield will have questions. He'll want to verify the documentation. That takes time. How much time? 2 weeks, maybe 3, before anything appears in print. She met his eyes. Langley may move before then. What does he do if he knows the paper has the story? He can try to suppress it. Men with money and relationships try that frequently. She paused. They succeed sometimes. But Whitfield has been at that paper for 11 years. He's not the kind of man who suppresses things easily. I read his previous work before I wrote to him the first time. Nathan looked at her. You researched the journalist before you contacted him. Of course. Naturally, he said with the quiet tone that was his version of being genuinely, helplessly impressed by her. She almost smiled. Get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. What's tomorrow? We rebuild the north fence. Better than Eli built it. Better than it's ever been. She stood and picked up the account book. And we do it where the 3 men can see it from the road if they come back. Nathan Cole looked at his wife in the lamplight of the kitchen they had shared for 4 months and felt with a clarity that needed no examination that the 2 silver dollars he had placed on an auction table in Millbrook were the single best investment he had made in his entire life. All right, he said. Good night, Emma. Good night, Nathan, she said. Eli rode the letter to Stratton at dawn. Nathan and Emma rebuilt the north fence. They worked side by side through the cold morning. Nathan setting posts, and Emma running wire with the competence she had built over 4 months of learning everything she'd decided to learn. And when Callum Trace arrived uninvited, as Callum reliably did when something needed doing, he took one look at the 2 of them working the fence line and picked up tools without being asked and worked the far section through the afternoon. Nobody came back on the road. Nobody needed to. The fence went up stronger than it had ever been. The week that followed was the kind of week that tests whether something is solid or only looks solid from a distance. Langley's pressure did not announce itself loudly. It came in small ways, a rumor in Millbrook that the Cole Ranch's cattle were sick, which was false, which Nathan disproved by bringing 2 perfectly healthy steers to the Tuesday market and selling them at fair price to a buyer from Colorado Springs who had no connection to Langley's arrangements. A visit from a county assessor who had come, he said, to re-examine the property valuation, a process that Nathan had never experienced in 7 years of owning the ranch, and which Emma immediately recognized as an attempt to manufacture a tax liability. She sat with the assessor for 2 hours. She produced every document relevant to the property valuation organized by date and category, including a comparison of the valuation methodology against the county assessment standards which she had obtained from the public records in Denver. The assessor left without finding a discrepancy. He did not look pleased about this. He'll report back that there's nothing to work with, Emma told Nathan that evening. Langley doesn't give up that easily, Nathan said. No, she said, but he's running out of quiet options, and I think he knows it. She paused. The dangerous moment is when a man like that runs out of quiet options. Nathan was quiet. We should tell the cooperative, he said. I already wrote them this afternoon. He looked at her. I know, she said. I should have told you first. No, he said. You were right to move fast. I trust your judgment. He paused. I just want to know. I'll tell you before I write next time, she said. I'm still learning what it means to not be working alone. He looked at her with the expression that had become over 4 months, the one she associated most specifically with Nathan Cole, the direct, undefended look of a man who is fully present to what is in front of him. So am I, he said. The letter from Whitfield arrived 11 days after Eli had written it to Stratton. It was short journalists who have been in the business for 11 years. Write short letters, and it said three things. First, that he had verified two of the documentary sources independently. Second, that he intended to publish the story in the Rocky Mountain News the following Friday, with or without comment from Victor Langley. Third, that he wanted a direct quote from Emma Cole specifically, and would she provide one. She read the letter twice. Then she picked up a pen and wrote 4 sentences that took her 20 minutes to arrive at and 10 seconds to write. She gave the letter back to Eli. "Stratton again," he said. "Stratton again," she said. "Today if possible." "I'll leave in an hour," he said. He paused. "What did you write for the quote?" She looked at him. He was 19 with a bandage above his eye that was almost healed on a ranch where he'd arrived with nothing and was leaving every day with something more than he'd had the day before. She told him what she'd written. He was quiet for a moment. "That's good," he said. "That's exactly right." He rode to Stratton. Nathan read the quote that evening from the copy she'd kept. A person's value is not determined by what others are willing to pay for them. It is determined by what they are willing to build when given the chance. The only question that has ever mattered on this ranch is whether we did the work. We did the work. He sat with it for a long moment. "That's what you want people to know," he said. "That's what's true," she said. He looked up. "Emma," he said. She met his eyes. "Marry me," he said. "Properly, with a ceremony, in front of people who know what it means." The kitchen was very quiet. Emma Carter, who had stood on an auction platform 6 months ago with the whole of Millbrook laughing at her and had decided in that moment that she would not give them the satisfaction of breaking, felt something in the center of her chest that was not composure and was not calculation and was not strategy. It was simply joy. "Yes," she said. He reached across the table and took her hand. This time, he did not let it go. The Rocky Mountain News published the story on a Friday morning, and by Friday afternoon, it had been read by approximately 4,000 people in Denver, and was being reprinted by 2 smaller territorial papers by the weekend. Whitfield had written it with the precision of a man who understood that facts presented clearly were more damaging than editorializing. He laid out the pattern of Langley's conduct in the valley, the auction manipulation, the documented payments, the cattle theft, the fire and the formal inquiry opened by Commissioner Graves, and he included Emma's quote in the final paragraph, where it landed with the force of a closing argument. Victor Langley's name appeared 17 times in the article. Each time it appeared in direct connection with a documented act. Nathan heard about the story from Daniel Henderson, who rode over Saturday morning with a copy of the paper and the expression of a young man who had just seen something shift irreversibly. "It's everywhere," Daniel said. "My mother read it. The pastor read it from the pulpit this morning, just the quote at the end. Just those 4 sentences. Nathan took the paper. He read the article in full standing in the yard, while Emma stood beside him reading it over his shoulder. When he finished, he looked at her. 4 sentences, he said. "The right 4 sentences," she said. Commissioner Graves opened the formal investigation into Langley's price manipulation practices the following Monday, citing the public documentation as grounds for expedited action. 2 ranchers who had previously been silent about Langley's arrangements, men who had spent years paying his extracted prices and saying nothing because the alternative had seemed worse, came forward within the week. Then 3 more. Then a cattle buyer from Pueblo who had been operating under Langley's pricing arrangements for 6 years and had, it turned out, been looking for precisely this moment to stop. Victor Langley hired a lawyer from Denver who was very expensive and very skilled, and who did in fact slow the process considerably. But he could not stop it, because the process was no longer invisible. Langley came to Coles Creek on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after the article appeared, riding alone for the first time Emma had ever seen him without his outfit around him. He tied his horse at the fence post and called out, and Nathan came to the door. Emma came to stand beside Nathan. Langley looked at them both. He looked different than he had on the road that first day. Not smaller exactly, but diminished in some internal way. The way a man looks when the thing he has been using to make himself seem large has been removed. "I want to talk," he said. "Then talk," Nathan said. Langley's eyes moved to Emma. I'd prefer... She stays, Nathan said. Not loudly, not with heat, just as fact. Langley was quiet for a moment. He accepted it. The investigation is going to find what it finds, he said. I'm not here to threaten. I'm here because I've been advised it's in everyone's interest to reach an arrangement. Emma spoke before Nathan could. What kind of arrangement? The cooperative pricing structure you've been building, I'm willing to recognize it, in writing. The ranches in your network negotiate directly with the Pueblo buyers. I step back from the county pricing arrangement. He paused. In return, the cooperative members don't pursue civil claims against me personally. The yard was quiet. Emma looked at Nathan. Nathan looked at Emma. Then Emma looked back at Langley. Let me be clear about what you're offering, she said. Her voice was perfectly level. You're offering to stop doing something that was already illegal in exchange for personal immunity from the consequences of having done it. Langley's jaw tightened. I'm offering a clean resolution. The investigation is already open, Emma said. The Pueblo buyer has already given a statement. The 5 ranchers who came forward have already given statements. The resolution isn't ours to give you, Mr. Langley. It belongs to Commissioner Graves and the Territorial Court. She paused. What I can tell you is that the cooperative has no interest in pursuing you personally beyond what the investigation requires. We're not doing this for revenge. We never were. Then what do you want? Langley said. The smooth surface had worn through. What was underneath it was not rage. It was the specific, unfamiliar discomfort of a powerful man who has discovered the limits of his power. We want to sell our cattle at a fair price, Emma said. We want to buy our grain without a 15% extraction. We want to operate our ranches without having our fences cut or our hay burned. She held his gaze. We want to be left alone to do the work. That's all we've ever wanted. Langley looked at her for a long moment. He looked at Nathan. He untied his horse. You're going to be a problem for a long time, he said. It was not said with menace. It was said with the reluctant recognition of a man who has correctly identified something he cannot change. We're going to be here for a long time, Emma said. Yes. He rode away. Nathan watched him go. Then he looked at Emma. That's it, he said. That's the beginning of it being finished, she said. The investigation takes months. The legal process takes what it takes. But the moment just now, that was him acknowledging. In the only way a man like that can acknowledge it, that he's lost the thing he was protecting. Nathan was quiet. You're remarkable, he said. She looked at him. You keep saying things like that, she said. I keep meaning them, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she turned back to the house. Come inside, she said. I need to write to Graves's office about what was just offered. Always working, he said. Always, she agreed. But the word in her voice had warmth in it now that it hadn't had 4 months ago. The work was not armor anymore. It was just what she did because she was who she was, and who she was had a place to be now. The formal investigation concluded 4 months later in the spring of 1879, with a territorial court ruling that Langley's pricing arrangements constituted unlawful restraint of commerce under the 1872 statutes. He was fined substantially, not enough to ruin a man of his resources, but enough to register, and the county pricing structure was officially dissolved. The Pueblo cattle buyers freed from Langley's arrangements opened direct negotiations with the Valley ranches. The first season of fair market pricing added 31% to the average income of the cooperative members. 31% was, as Emma noted in her account book, in the careful notation she used for things that had been proven right, the difference between a ranch that survives and a ranch that builds. They were married on a Saturday in April in the church in Millbrook, the same church that had a new pastor, now a quiet man from Ohio, who had no connection to the deacon's wife incident of the previous year, and who performed the ceremony with genuine warmth and considerably less drama than the previous year's entertainment season had provided. The cooperative members were all there. Daniel Henderson brought his mother, who cried the good kind of crying, from the second row. Callum Trace wore a clean shirt which Emma later told Nathan she had not been certain was possible. Rosalind Pierce brought flowers from her garden. Eli Grover stood at the back of the church with his hands in his pockets and the expression of a young man who is watching something he is glad to have been part of. Clara Briggs sat in the middle pews. Her husband was not with her. It had become clear over the winter, been made to understand that his position in the community had changed considerably, and Clara had quietly and without drama taken over the trading post accounts entirely, and had told Nathan in passing one Tuesday that she intended to buy out her husband's half-interest by the end of the year. Nathan had told Emma. Emma had said, "Good for her." Horace Milner, the auctioneer, did not attend the wedding. Nobody had asked him. The ceremony was short. Emma had insisted on short. She had no patience for ceremonies that mistook length for meaning, and the pastor had been understanding about this. The vows were traditional, but said with the weight of people who had been tested enough to know exactly what they were promising. When Nathan said, "I will," he meant through drought and debt and cut fences and burning hay and powerful men on county roads. When Emma said, "I will," she meant through grief and solitude, and the specific loneliness of a man who stopped listening for sounds in his own house. They both meant "I already have." The ranch they rode back to that afternoon was not the ranch Nathan had driven away from on the day of the Millbrook auction. The house had a new roof installed the previous autumn by Nathan and Eli and Daniel Henderson across 2 hard weekends. The porch railing had no gaps. The south window had real glass instead of stuffed cloth. The barn was reinforced and solid and smelled of good hay, a full winter reserve purchased at cooperative prices sufficient. The herd stood at 62 cattle. The orchard on the eastern edge had its first flowers of the year, small and white and precise, which Emma had gone to look at every morning for a week before she would let herself call it confirmed. She had confirmed it on the Thursday before the wedding, standing among the trees with dirt on her hands and something in her face that Nathan, watching from a distance, had understood was private and had not interrupted. He had given her the room, as he always had. The kitchen garden had been replanted for its second season, larger than the first by roughly a third, with a supply agreement with Clara Briggs's trading post that was, Emma had noted with satisfaction, exactly 9 cents per pound. Eli Grover had at the first of the year been offered a formal wage position rather than the labor exchange arrangement. He had accepted. He had also in November brought his mother and 2 siblings to a property the Vickers family had available for rent nearby, which Emma had identified and brought to Eli's attention without being asked, because she had been watching his situation since the first week he'd worked for them, and had been waiting for the right moment to mention it. He had stood in the yard when she told him and looked at the sky for a moment, and then said, "Thank you, Mrs. Cole," in a voice that had something working in it that he was too young and too private to fully name. She had said, "It's Emma. It's been Emma for 4 months, Eli." He had said, "Thank you, Emma," in a voice that meant exactly what it said. It was on an evening in late spring, maybe 6 weeks after the wedding, that Nathan came in from the barn and found Emma not at the kitchen table where he expected her, but on the porch, sitting in the chair that had become over the months. Her chair, the one closer to the step, the one from which she could see the eastern edge of the property and at the right time of day, the orchard. He came to stand beside her. He didn't ask what she was thinking, because he had learned that Emma was often thinking something she would tell him when she was ready to tell him, and the asking didn't accelerate it. She said after a moment, "I've been writing to 2 families in the territory east of here. Similar situation to what we were in 18 months ago. Drought, debt, one man trying to do everything alone." "You've been writing to them," he said. "For 3 weeks. I didn't mention it because I wasn't sure yet whether anything would come of it. And now," one of them wrote back. She paused. "Nathan, the cooperative, we've been treating it as a defense. Protection for existing members. But it doesn't have to be only that." He looked at her. "It can be a road-in," she said, "for families who are where we were. The information we have now about the grain cooperative, the bank restructuring the territorial labor laws, the Pueblo buyers, that's not special knowledge. It shouldn't be rare. It should just be available." He was quiet for a moment. "You want to expand the cooperative," he said. "I want to make it into something that doesn't need us to run it," she said. "Something that exists on its own, that any ranching family in the territory can access." He thought about this. "That's a much bigger thing than what we built." "Yes," she said. But we know how to build. We've proven that. She looked at him. Do you think it's too much? He looked at her in the evening light. This woman who had stood on a platform in Millbrook while people laughed, who had taken his last $2 and his broken ranch and his 7 years of silence and turned all of it into something alive, who had fought a powerful man with nothing but documents and a journalist and 4 sentences, who was sitting here now 6 weeks after their wedding already thinking about what came next for people she had never met. No, he said. I don't think it's too much. She looked at him. I think we should write back tonight, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she stood, and as she moved past him toward the door, she put her hand briefly on his chest. Just a moment, just the warmth of it, and went inside. He stood on the porch for a moment longer. The orchard was flowering on the east edge. The cattle were settled in the south pasture. The lamp came on inside the house, and through the window he could see Emma at the table already opening her notebook, already reaching for her pen, already beginning the next thing. He thought about $2 silver on an auction table. He thought about what they had bought. Not a wife, not a worker, not even a partner, though she was all of those things and more. What those $2 silver had bought was the precise opportunity offered to both of them in equal measure to discover what each of them was capable of being when someone stood beside them and refused to look away. He had stood beside her. She had stood beside him. That was the whole of it, and the whole of it was everything. Nathan Cole walked inside. He sat down across from Emma at the kitchen table. He picked up his pen. They wrote the letter together. And in the valley where a broke cowboy had once been mocked for spending his last 2 coins on a woman, nobody wanted the lamp burned steady in the window of the richest ranch in the territory. Not rich in cattle, not rich in land, but rich in the only currency that had ever survived a hard season. The kind of love that doesn't wait for perfect conditions, that builds in the middle of drought and debt, and fire that looks at what is broken and says, I'll stay and will fix it, and means it and does. That was what $2 silver bought on a summer day in Millbrook, Colorado in the year 1878. That was what they were all